The world had been peaceful for a long time. Too peaceful, some said. The great warships that once guarded Earth now floated quietly in orbit, their engines cold, their metal hulls collecting dust from the endless sky. No one wanted to remember the last war. Billions had died, and humanity had promised itself never to fight again. Children grew up without knowing the sound of sirens. The stars above were no longer symbols of danger. They were symbols of hope. But peace has a strange way of making people forget how fragile safety can be, Admiral Rowan Hale remembered. He was a man built from discipline and silence, a soldier who had lived through battles that turned entire continents into ash. His eyes carried the weight of history, and his voice carried the calm of someone who had already seen the worst that the universe could offer. Yet deep down even he wanted to believe that war would never return. He wanted to believe that humanity had finally learned to live without fear. Every morning Rowan stood by the observation window of the fleet headquarters, watching the blue curve of Earth below. The planet looked so calm, oceans glittering, clouds drifting slowly like white ghosts. From up there, it was easy to believe that nothing bad could ever happen again. The fleets were only a memory, reminders of a time when humans nearly destroyed themselves. Now they served as monuments of warning, kept alive only by routine maintenance and small crews who had never seen real combat. But the quiet never lasts forever. It started as a whisper from the outer colonies, small settlements far beyond, the safety of Earth's influence. The first reports were strange and confusing. Mining outposts stopped responding. Communication relays went dark. Cargo ships sent messages about seeing strange lights moving through space, faster than anything human-made. At first, the authorities ignored it. Space was full of dangers, storms, magnetic fields, signal loss. It wasn't unusual for colonies to go silent for days or even weeks, but this time the silence stretched too long. Rowan's instincts told him something was wrong. He had seen too many conflicts begin with small warnings that no one took seriously. He began asking for updates, scanning reports and analyzing old data. One evening, as he sat in the dim light of his office, the transmission came. A shaky voice filled the room, the voice of a young woman from the Arcturus sector. Her words were broken by static, but the fear in her tone was clear. They're not ships. They're alive. They're burning the skies. Then silence. The message repeated over and over as if the system itself didn't want to let go of those final words. Rowan played it again and again, listening to the horror hidden behind the noise. Whatever had happened out there, it wasn't natural. He ordered his aides to trace the signal, to contact any remaining outposts nearby. No one responded. The Arcturus sector was gone, its stars empty, its people erased as if they had never existed. News of the missing colonies spread fast. Within days, Earth's media was filled with panic. Families demanded answers. Scientists argued about what could cause such total destruction. Politicians tried to calm the public, saying it was a technical issue or a natural disaster. But deep in the military networks, encrypted data painted a different story. The destruction was deliberate. It was organized. Something intelligent was behind it. Rowan met with the Earth Defense Council in a quiet chamber high above the planet's surface. The members were nervous. Some didn't want to believe that an alien force had returned. Others feared that admitting it would start another galactic panic. Rowan listened in silence until they asked for his opinion. "It's not a question of if they'll come for us," he said softly. "It's a question of when." Those words settled over the room like cold fog. That night, for the first time in years, the lights of Earth's orbital fleet flickered back to life. Massive warships, names like Valiant, Endeavor, Crusader, and Solar Dawn, woke from their long sleep. Engines roared after decades of silence. Dockyards buzzed with movement as engineers, pilots, and soldiers reported for duty. Some were veterans, old enough to remember the last war. Most were young, brave faces hiding quiet fear. As the great ships prepared, humanity's leaders broadcast a single message across all systems. "We answer the call." It was short, simple, but powerful. People on Earth stood in the streets watching as the night sky shimmered with streaks of light, warships rising through the atmosphere like glowing arrows. Children cheered. Parents cried. Everyone knew that history was moving again, that peace had ended. Rowan didn't celebrate. He stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Resolute, watching the Earth fade beneath him. He thought about the colonies that had fallen, about the people who had begged for help and received none in time. He thought about how easily comfort had made humanity forget its own strength. The fleet was humanity's greatest creation and its greatest curse, built for war, but kept alive by fear. He spoke quietly to his second-in-command, Captain Lyra Tran, a sharp-minded officer who had never seen battle. "You understand what this means," he said. She nodded. "We're going back to the fire." He looked at her and saw the same determination he once had when he was young. Maybe that was what gave him hope, that even after years of peace, humanity could still stand when threatened. Days turned into weeks as the fleet readied itself. Old systems were tested, weapons recalibrated, engines recharged. On every ship, men and women trained for something they barely understood. The silence before war is always the hardest part, the waiting, the not knowing. Some crew members wrote messages to their families, promising they'd come home. Others prayed to gods they didn't believe in. Rowan, as always, stayed quiet. He often returned to the observation deck at night, staring at the stars. Somewhere out there beyond human space, the enemy was moving. He could almost feel their presence, like a shadow spreading across the galaxy. He didn't know what they wanted. He only knew what they had done. And that was enough. Then one morning the orders came. The fleet was to depart for the Arcturus sector to investigate and, if necessary, engage the threat. The words "if necessary" felt almost insulting. Everyone already knew what they would find there. The ships aligned in perfect formation, stretching like silver spears against the darkness. Admiral Rowan Hale gave the signal. Engines flared. The great fleet surged forward into the unknown, leaving behind the safety of Earth's orbit. The stars stretched into lines of light as the jump drives activated, and in that instant, humanity stepped once again into the abyss of war. Inside his command chair, Rowan watched the coordinates change on his display. The hum of the engines filled the room. Every person aboard could feel it, the heavy mix of fear and pride. They were not just soldiers. They were the shield of their species. As the fleet disappeared into hyperspace, Rowan closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered the last words of the lost transmission, the voice saying, "They're burning the skies." He whispered a quiet promise into the darkness. "This time, we'll answer." And for the first time in years, the universe listened. The news of the lost colonies spread like wildfire. Every screen on Earth flashed with updates. Every news channel repeated the same dreadful words. Arcturus sector destroyed. No survivors found. People gathered in crowded city squares, watching the skies as if expecting the enemy to appear above them. Panic was rising fast. Some said it was a solar storm. Others whispered that aliens had returned, stronger than before. No one knew what to believe, but everyone felt the same cold fear in their hearts. The peace they had trusted for so long was broken. In the great command hall of Earth's defense network, Admiral Rowan Hale stood before a wall of holographic maps. The red markers showing lost colonies were spreading like drops of blood across a star chart. One after another, the outposts went dark, each one silenced without a trace. It wasn't random. It was a pattern, moving closer toward human space. Rowan's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of precision before. It was the mark of an organized enemy, one that didn't act out of rage but out of purpose. While governments argued about what to do, Rowan didn't waste a second. He ordered the reactivation of the defense fleets. Ships that had slept in orbit for decades powered up again. Docks that had been silent suddenly roared to life. Mechanics worked around the clock to prepare the war machines that humanity had promised never to use again. It was a massive operation. Tens of thousands of crew members reporting for duty. Engineers fixing engines, scientists recalibrating old weapons. The once forgotten shipyards were alive again, shining like silver cities against the dark sky. From every part of the world, volunteers came forward. Some were soldiers' children. Others were simple citizens who couldn't stand by and do nothing. They filled the training academies, the pilot seats, and the control rooms. Everyone had heard the cries for help from Arcturus. Everyone wanted to make sure that never happened again. The fear that had gripped humanity began to turn into anger, and then into unity. Across the globe, a message was sent from the United Earth Council. The words were simple. Humanity stands together. We answer the call. It was broadcast across every colony, every ship, every city. For the first time in living memory, humanity wasn't divided by borders or beliefs. They had one purpose: to protect their kind no matter the cost. Rowan watched from the command bridge as Earth's night sky lit up with hundreds of glowing trails. Warships rose through the clouds, leaving behind streaks of blue fire. Each one carried thousands of brave souls heading toward the unknown. The sight made his chest tighten, not from pride but from the heavy responsibility he carried. He knew that every shining ship was a promise, and every promise came with a price. He met with the fleet commanders through a holographic conference. Faces from different nations and backgrounds filled the air around him. Some were young and eager. Others were veterans like him, worn but unbroken. "We go not for revenge," Rowan said quietly, "but for survival. The colonies called for help and we didn't answer in time. We won't make that mistake again." His words echoed through the connection, and every commander nodded. Meanwhile, the last survivors from the outer sectors began sending fragments of data. The alien enemy, whatever it was, did not communicate. It didn't demand or negotiate. It simply arrived, analyzed, and destroyed. It used machines made of black metal that absorbed light, moving like a living storm. Scientists studying the fragments called it the Swarm. No one knew who built it or why it targeted human worlds. Some believed it was artificial intelligence gone rogue. Others thought it was an ancient alien weapon that had awakened after centuries of silence. The news only made the fleet train harder. Every soldier wanted to be ready. Inside the ships, there were endless drills, combat simulations, emergency protocols, weapon calibrations. Sleep was a luxury, but no one complained. The hum of engines and the echo of marching boots filled the corridors of every warship. The air smelled of oil, metal, and determination. Admiral Rowan Hale spent most of his time on the flagship, the Resolute. It was the largest vessel ever built by humans, capable of carrying hundreds of smaller fighters and enough firepower to destroy moons. But even such power felt small compared to the unknown. He often stood at the main viewport staring into the stars, wondering what awaited them in the darkness. Captain Lyra Tran, his second-in-command, joined him one night as they prepared for launch. She was young but steady, her voice clear even under pressure. "Do you think we can win?" she asked softly. Rowan didn't answer immediately. He looked at the star map projected in front of them, the blinking red points showing lost colonies. "Winning," he said after a pause, "depends on what we're fighting. If it's a machine, we'll outthink it. If it's alive, we'll outlast it. Either way, humanity doesn't surrender." Lyra smiled faintly. "Then I'll follow you to the end." "You might have to," Rowan replied. His tone was calm, but his eyes told a different story. He knew what was coming would test every ounce of human courage. The fleet's launch was broadcast live. People across Earth watched as the colossal ships began their ascent. The roar of engines shook the skies. Children waved flags, families prayed, and millions whispered the same silent hope: that their protectors would return. It wasn't just a military mission anymore. It was a message to the universe. Humanity would not vanish quietly. As the ships reached orbit, the fleet formed up. It was a breathtaking sight. A wall of steel and light stretching across space, thousands of ships aligned in perfect formation. Their shields shimmered faintly, reflecting the glow of Earth below. For the first time in generations, humanity had become one united force. Inside the Resolute, tension filled the air. The crew took their stations, eyes fixed on the navigation screens. The order was simple: enter the Arcturus sector, assess the threat, and if possible, destroy it. But everyone knew it was far from simple. Before departure, Rowan addressed the entire fleet. His face appeared on every screen, his voice calm and steady. "You are the shield of our people," he said. "You are the answer to the cries we ignored. Whatever waits for us in that darkness, we meet it together, not as soldiers of one nation, but as defenders of all humanity." The silence that followed was powerful. Every person listening felt the weight of his words. Then slowly, the crews began their launch sequence. Engines powered up. Lights dimmed. The countdown started. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The fleet jumped. In a burst of light, the stars around them stretched into long white lines. The hum of the jump drives vibrated through the ships, and space itself seemed to twist and fold. For a few seconds, everything was silent except the soft rhythm of machinery. Then the ships emerged from hyperspace, arriving near the edge of the Arcturus system. What they saw stole the breath from every person aboard. The once bright colonies were gone. The planets that had been full of life were now lifeless orbs, their surfaces blackened and cracked. Massive chunks of metal floated in the void, remains of human ships torn apart like paper. The space around them was filled with debris, drifting silently in the darkness. It was not a battlefield, it was a graveyard. Rowan stood on the bridge, his expression unreadable. "Scan for survivors," he ordered. The crew obeyed, but everyone knew what they would find. Nothing. Only silence. Then suddenly the sensors detected movement. Far out in the distance, faint signals appeared, cold, pulsing, mechanical. The enemy was still there. They had not left. They were waiting. The bridge grew quiet. Everyone looked at Rowan. He didn't hesitate. "All ships, battle formation," he commanded. "If they want to finish what they started, we'll give them a war they'll never forget." The crews moved like lightning, their training kicking in. Weapons charged, shields activated, engines roared again. The emptiness of space was replaced by a fierce energy, the heartbeat of a species preparing to fight for survival. As the enemy signatures grew closer, Rowan glanced one last time at the image of Earth glowing faintly on the main screen. "For home," he whispered, and with that, humanity's greatest fleet advanced into the darkness, ready to face the nightmare that had erased their brothers and sisters among the stars. The human fleet entered the war zone, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The stars around them were quiet, but the silence felt wrong, too heavy, too still. Space was filled with broken metal, shattered satellites, and pieces of ships that once carried human families and dreams. Every drifting object told a story of people who had fought and lost. The light from distant suns reflected off the debris, creating a strange, ghostly glow. It was beautiful in a sad way, like looking at the ruins of a forgotten world. Admiral Rowan Hale stood in the center of the Resolute's command bridge, his eyes fixed on the main screen. Around him, the crew worked in complete silence, their faces pale. The scanners kept sending back horrifying data, radiation traces, melted alloys, and the faint energy signature of something unnatural. Whatever had destroyed these colonies had done it fast and with precision. There were no signs of struggle, no escape pods, no distress signals. It was as if life itself had been erased from this part of the galaxy. Captain Lyra Tran leaned closer to Rowan. "Sir, the outer scouts are reporting movement. Small objects circling the remains of the colonies." "Could be drones." Rowan nodded slowly. "Put it on screen." The image shifted, and the crew saw them. Hundreds of small black shapes drifting through the wreckage. They moved in perfect coordination, like schools of fish gliding through the void. Their surfaces absorbed light instead of reflecting it, making them almost invisible. Every few seconds, one of them pulsed faintly with blue energy, scanning the debris like a predator sniffing the air. A young officer whispered, "Are they alive?" Rowan didn't answer. He didn't know. The enemy didn't look like anything humanity had ever faced before. They were not ships in the human sense. They had no windows, no engines, no signs of pilots. They were more like machines, floating minds made of metal and electricity. Intelligent, cold, and without emotion. Then the scanners beeped. A much larger object appeared behind the swarm, massive, silent, and moving straight toward them. The crew froze. On the screen, it looked like a mountain of metal slowly emerging from the darkness. Its shape constantly shifted, like it was alive and rebuilding itself with every passing second. Its surface shimmered with strange energy lines that ran like veins across its body. It wasn't just one machine, it was thousands fused together. The computer tried to analyze it, but failed. The screen showed only one word: unknown. Captain Tran's voice trembled. "Sir, what are your orders?" Rowan stared at the monstrous thing on the screen. He could feel the weight of every life under his command, thousands of souls waiting for his word. "We hold position," he said firmly. "No one fires unless I say so." Minutes passed. The enemy didn't attack. It simply floated closer, scanning them. Then suddenly, every communication channel in the fleet lit up with static. Strange sounds filled the air, a mix of whispers, screams, and mechanical tones. It wasn't a message in any known language, but it felt like something intelligent was trying to speak. The sound made everyone's skin crawl. "Shut it off," Rowan ordered. But before they could react, the swarm moved. The smaller black machines broke formation and shot forward at impossible speed. The first wave struck one of the scout ships. On the screen, the crew watched in horror as the ship's hull melted away in seconds, turning into a cloud of glowing dust. There was no explosion, no fire, just disintegration. The ship was gone as if it had never existed. "Open fire!" Rowan shouted. Every ship in the fleet responded instantly. Beams of plasma and kinetic missiles burst through the darkness, lighting up space like a second sun. The silence was replaced by thunder. The swarm scattered, their black forms darting between the blasts. Some were destroyed, others adapted, their shapes changing mid-flight. The fleet's weapons hit them, but not fast enough. The enemy moved like shadows, unpredictable and deadly. Rowan's voice was steady despite the chaos. "Keep formation. Focus fire on one cluster at a time." The command worked. Slowly, the fleet began to push back. Each time a swarm group was hit, the machines exploded into glowing fragments that drifted away like sparks in the wind. But the victory didn't last long. The massive structure in the distance began to pulse with light. Energy gathered around it, bright enough to make the entire sector glow. "Energy spike detected," shouted the sensor officer. Rowan turned toward the screen, just as a beam of pure light shot out from the alien structure. It tore through space, cutting across several human ships in a single instant. The explosion blinded the cameras. When the light faded, 5 ships were gone, wiped from existence. "Counterattack. All ships, full barrage," Rowan commanded. The fleet unleashed everything it had. Missiles, laser fire, plasma bursts. It was a storm of destruction. The space between the two forces became a sea of light and fire. The smaller enemy drones exploded one after another, but the massive entity kept advancing. Each hit only seemed to slow it, not destroy it. It was learning, adapting. Inside the ship, alarms screamed. Crew members moved fast, sweat dripping from their faces, their hands shaking but steady on controls. Even though they were terrified, no one ran. Humanity's finest were doing what they were born to do, fight when hope seemed impossible. Captain Tran looked at Rowan. "We're being overrun, sir. The swarm is surrounding our flanks." Rowan narrowed his eyes. "Then we change the battlefield." He turned to his communications officer. "Signal the hammer line to prepare the solar flares. We'll light the sky." Moments later, a new command rippled across the fleet. Ships carrying massive energy charges began to maneuver toward the nearby star. Their goal was simple but dangerous: to trigger a controlled solar eruption that would create a wave strong enough to fry the enemy's systems. It was a desperate move, but desperate moves were all they had left. "Sir, if this fails," Tran began, but Rowan interrupted softly. "It won't fail. Humanity has faced extinction before. We always find a way." The operation began. As the Hammerline ships neared the star, they released their charges. The countdown began. 10 seconds to detonation. On the Resolute's bridge, everyone held their breath. The massive alien entity seemed to sense what was coming. It shifted direction, moving toward the energy ships to stop them. "Detonate!" Rowan shouted. A brilliant wave of light erupted from the star. It spread outward like a fiery ocean, swallowing everything in its path. The shockwave hit the swarm first. The smaller machines disintegrated instantly, their bodies turning to ash. The massive structure twisted violently, its energy veins flickering and fading. For the first time, the enemy was hurt. The fleet rode, the edge of the explosion, shields cracking under the pressure. The bridge shook violently, sparks flying from panels. Crew members struggled to stay on their feet. When the light finally faded, the scanners showed what everyone had hoped to see. The enemy signal was gone. A heavy silence filled the ship. No one spoke for several seconds. Then Captain Tran whispered, "We did it." Rowan didn't smile. His eyes stayed on the screen. "Not yet," he said quietly. "Scan the wreckage." The scanners flickered for a moment before showing faint energy readings. The massive structure was still there, but weak, broken, and drifting. It was dying, but not destroyed. Rowan watched it slowly fade into the void. "Sir," said the communications officer. "Incoming message from the outer fleet. They're reporting clear skies. The swarm's gone." Rowan exhaled, his shoulders relaxing slightly. Around him the crew cheered quietly, some crying in relief. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The way the enemy had attacked, the way it had adapted, it hadn't been random. It had been testing them. He turned to Tran. This wasn't their full strength. This was only a scout. She looked at him in disbelief. A scout? That thing wiped out entire worlds. Rowan nodded slowly. And it learned from us today. When they come again, they'll be ready. He walked toward the viewport, watching the dying fragments of the alien machine drift through the stars. The glow of the fading battle reflected in his eyes. For the first time in years, humanity had faced a true enemy and survived. But deep down, Rowan knew this was only the beginning. Behind him, the crew began to repair systems, send reports, and treat the wounded. The fleet had won the first fight, but the cost was heavy. Dozens of ships were gone, thousands of lives lost. Yet amidst the sorrow, there was pride. Humanity had stood its ground in the face of extinction and refused to fall. As the Resolute turned toward home, Rowan gave one final order. Send a message to Earth. Tell them, we're not alone. And in the silence of space, the message carried far and wide, a warning written in light and courage, echoing across the stars. The stars burned quietly as humanity's fleet moved through the wreckage of the battle. The silence after the storm felt unreal. Fires still flickered on the torn hulls of destroyed ships, and broken metal drifted slowly through the void like snow. Thousands had died, and yet there was no time to mourn. Every survivor knew the enemy was not truly gone. The scanners still showed strange signals far beyond the edge of the system. Weak, fading, but alive. The swarm was hurt, not defeated. Admiral Rowan Hale understood that better than anyone. He stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the hollow darkness where the alien structure had vanished. His face was calm, but his mind was racing. Captain Lyra Tran approached him, her uniform scorched from battle damage. "Sir, the repair crews are ready," she said softly. "We've lost nearly a third of the fleet. The rest are low on energy." Rowan didn't turn to face her. "They'll have to fight with what's left," he replied. His voice was steady but heavy. "This isn't over, they'll come again, I can feel it." He was right. An hour later, the silence was broken by the long, low hum of energy building in the distance. The scanners began to flash red. The readings were unstable, too strong to identify. "Something's happening out there," a young officer shouted. "Energy levels are off the charts." Everyone turned toward the main screen. Far beyond the remains of the destroyed alien structure, the darkness began to glow faintly blue. Small sparks of light appeared, hundreds, then thousands, forming a growing pattern that pulsed like a heartbeat. The crew watched in stunned silence as those lights expanded into shape. It was another swarm, larger than before, spreading like an endless wave. Rowan's eyes narrowed. "They're regenerating," he said quietly. The wreckage wasn't dead. It was rebuilding. Panic rippled through the crew. The first swarm had nearly wiped them out. Facing a second one seemed impossible. But Rowan's voice cut through the fear. "All ships, battle alert. This is it. We either end them here, or humanity burns next." Orders flashed across the fleet's channels. The surviving ships reformed into tight defensive lines, positioning themselves around the Resolute. Engineers worked desperately to restore damaged weapons and shields. Medical bays overflowed with wounded, but even injured soldiers refused to rest. Every hand was needed. Outside, the alien swarm began to move. The black machines flowed through space like liquid shadows. Behind them, the enormous core structure pulsed brighter and brighter, its surface forming new limbs and spires. It looked less like a ship and more like a growing creature, a machine trying to become something alive. Rowan stood tall in the center of the chaos. "Target the core," he ordered. "If we cut off its power, the swarm dies with it." The first volley began. Human warships unleashed streams of light across the void. Missiles, plasma bolts, and railgun slugs flying faster than thought. Explosions lit up the dark, shaking the heavens. For a brief moment, it felt like the first battle all over again. But this time, the enemy adapted faster. The swarm shifted, forming walls of black metal to absorb the attacks. Each wall reflected and redirected energy, sending blasts back at the fleet. Ships were torn apart like paper. Rowan gripped the edge of his console as the ship trembled from the impact. "Hold formation," he shouted. "We can't let them surround us." Captain Tran was coordinating the flanking lines, her voice sharp and clear over the comms. "Omega Wing, fall back. Delta Wing, move to cover the vanguard. Don't let them breach the center." The crew obeyed with perfect discipline, but the enemy was relentless. Every destroyed drone seemed to split into two smaller ones, crawling through space like insects. The fleet's outer defense lines were breaking. Rowan's tactical screen was filling with red warnings. They were being overwhelmed. But then he noticed something: the swarm's energy flow. It was concentrating toward the massive alien core. If that connection could be severed, the swarm might lose its control. He looked at the glowing structure and made his decision. He opened the fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Hale," he said. "All ships, listen carefully. We're changing tactics. The swarm is feeding off its core. If we destroy that, they fall. I'm ordering all remaining cruisers and battleships to focus everything on the core. Fighters, draw the swarm away from the main line." There was silence for a second, then hundreds of voices replied together. "Yes, sir." The fleet shifted instantly. Smaller ships dove into the chaos, weaving between the alien drones and pulling their fire away from the main ships. The larger vessels aligned their cannons toward the pulsing heart of the swarm. The moment the target locks turned green, Rowan gave the order. "Fire!" The combined blast of the human fleet was so powerful that it lit up an entire side of the system. Beams of energy ripped through the swarm's shields, cutting deep into the alien structure. For the first time, the creature screamed, not in sound but in vibration. The space around them shuddered as if reality itself felt the pain. Pieces of the structure broke away, spinning into the void. "Direct hit," shouted the sensor officer. "The core is destabilizing." But before the crew could celebrate, the swarm counterattacked with fury. Thousands of drones launched themselves at the human ships in suicide runs. Explosions flashed everywhere. One after another, ships vanished in bursts of light. The Crusader went down, protecting the left flank. The Solar Dawn's engines exploded after a direct hit. Every death shook Rowan, but he didn't flinch. "Stay on target." He yelled, "Don't stop firing!" The enemy core began to collapse in on itself, its blue light flickering like a dying flame. But it wasn't going down alone. The structure's remaining energy started to build, faster than before. It was preparing to release everything in one massive explosion, a final act of destruction that would take the fleet with it. Rowan realized it immediately. "They're overloading their core," he said. "They're trying to take us with them." Captain Tran turned toward him, her face pale. "If that detonates, the entire fleet will be vaporized." He looked at the glowing monster on the screen and took a deep breath. "Then we give it something to take with it." He called the communications officer. "Get me the hammer line. Tell them to load every remaining warhead and aim for the center. I want everything we have left, no holding back." Within moments, the order was sent. Across the battlefield, the surviving ships redirected their last missiles toward the alien structure. The sky filled with streaks of white fire as hundreds of nuclear and plasma warheads locked onto the target. Captain Tran hesitated. "Sir, if that explosion happens too close, we won't make it out either." Rowan gave a faint smile. "We'll make it far enough." He looked out at the dying stars, his voice calm. "For Earth, Lyra, for all of us." The countdown began. The alien structure pulsed brighter, gathering energy for its final blast. At the same time, the human missiles raced toward it, their engines burning with desperate light. The two forces met in the center of the war zone. The universe went white. The explosion was beyond anything anyone had ever seen. Light filled every screen, every sensor. The shockwave spread for thousands of kilometers, ripping through space like a tidal wave. Ships were thrown off course, shields shattered, and engines overloaded. The swarm disintegrated instantly, its black metal bodies turning to dust. The alien core cracked open, releasing a brilliant burst of energy before collapsing into itself. When the light faded, silence returned. For several seconds, no one on the Resolute moved. The air was filled with static and the sound of distant alarms. Then a faint signal came through. All surviving ships, report status, Rowan said. Voices began to reply one by one. The Vanguard, damaged but alive. Endeavour, missing engines but operational. Aurora, half crew lost but still standing. Against all odds, a part of the fleet had survived. Captain Tran let out a long breath. It's over, she whispered. Rowan didn't answer. He looked at the screen showing the remains of the battle, the fading light where the enemy had been. His heart felt heavy. No, he said quietly. It's never over. But tonight we live. The surviving ships slowly regrouped, their lights flickering weakly in the darkness. Medical teams worked non-stop to rescue survivors from drifting wrecks. The once proud armada was now only a shadow of what it had been, but it had won. Humanity had faced an enemy beyond understanding and erased it. As the Resolute turned toward home, the broken fleet followed behind like weary ghosts. Earth waited for news, unaware of how close it had come to destruction. Rowan stood by the viewport, watching the stars return to their quiet glow. The battle was over, but its memory would never fade. He whispered to himself, "Let the galaxy remember this day. Let them remember that humanity does not bow." And somewhere in the distance beyond the ruined sector, the last flicker of alien light blinked once and vanished into the endless dark. The journey back to Earth was long and quiet. The stars stretched endlessly around the wounded fleet as it drifted through space. The great battle was over, but its echoes still haunted every survivor. Inside the Resolute, Admiral Rowan Hale stood before the viewing glass, his reflection barely visible in the dim light. His uniform was torn, his face pale, and his eyes carried the weight of thousands of lost souls. The silence felt heavier than any explosion. Outside, broken ships moved slowly, engines flickering like dying candles. Humanity had won, but the price had been almost unbearable. Captain Lyra Tran entered the command bridge softly. She was walking with a limp, her arm still bandaged from burns. "The engineers have restored partial communications," she said quietly. "Earth Command is waiting for your report." Rowan didn't turn. He kept watching the stars. "They'll want to hear victory," he murmured. "But I'm not sure what to call this." Lyra stood beside him, looking out at the drifting wrecks of once great warships. "Maybe survival is enough," she said gently. Rowan finally nodded. "Maybe." He walked to the communication console and activated the channel. The holographic screen flickered to life, showing the emblem of Earth Command. A moment later, a tired-looking general appeared. "Admiral Hale," he said, his voice mixed with relief and disbelief. "You're alive." Rowan gave a faint smile. "Somehow," he replied. "But many aren't." The general looked down, clearly aware of the cost. "We've been monitoring your transmissions." "Is it true, the alien threat, it's gone?" Rowan hesitated. He remembered the light, the explosion, the swarm's final scream. "It's destroyed," he said finally. "At least for now." Their core collapsed completely. Nothing survived. The general sighed deeply, his shoulders relaxing for the first time. "You saved us all, Admiral. Humanity owes you and your people everything." Rowan shook his head. "Don't thank me. Thank the ones who didn't come back." The transmission ended and the bridge fell silent again. Lyra looked at him, her eyes full of quiet respect. "You should rest," she said softly. "You haven't slept in 3 days." Rowan looked out the window one more time. "I will," he said, though they both knew he wouldn't. Hours passed. The fleet continued its slow journey home. Engineers patched what they could, doctors worked without stopping, and crew members sat in silence thinking of friends they'd never see again. Every corner of every ship carried memories, laughter that once filled the halls, voices that now echoed only in the mind. As they neared the Sol system, the first sight of Earth appeared on the screen, a blue and white marble shining against the darkness. The crew broke into quiet smiles and tears. Some fell to their knees in relief. For months they had seen nothing but blackness and death. Now they saw home. Messages flooded in from Earth. Cities stopped to watch the news of the fleet's return. Millions gathered in streets, praying and cheering, waving flags as the first transmissions arrived. "They did it," people said again and again. "They saved us." When the fleet entered Earth's orbit, hundreds of rescue and repair vessels launched to meet them. The Resolute was guided gently into a massive docking bay. As its engines powered down, the familiar pull of gravity returned. For the first time in weeks, the crew stepped onto solid ground. Many of them fell to their knees, some kissed the floor, Others just stared in silence. Rows of medics and officials waited to greet them. Cameras captured every moment, broadcasting the images across the planet. The heroes of the Battle of the Void had come home. But for Rowan, the noise of celebration felt distant, unreal. He could still hear the explosions, the cries, the static-filled last words of dying soldiers. Later, he stood before the Global Council. The Grand Hall was filled with leaders, scientists, and citizens from every nation. The air was thick with emotion. When Rowan walked in, the crowd rose to their feet in thunderous applause. But he didn't smile. He saluted quietly, then spoke. "We fought not for glory," he said slowly, his voice steady but tired. "We fought because we had no choice. The enemy we faced was unlike anything humanity had ever known. It was intelligent, endless, and merciless. But we learned something out there, something more powerful than any weapon." The room was silent. Everyone listened closely. "We learned that unity is our greatest strength," Rowan continued. "Every ship, every crew member, every nation stood as one. We didn't fight as Americans or Europeans or Martians, we fought as humans. And that's why we're standing here now." The hall erupted in applause again, but Rowan simply nodded and stepped back. As he left the stage, he caught Lyra Tran's eye. She smiled faintly, knowing how much those words meant. In the days that followed, the world celebrated. Cities lit up the night sky with fireworks. Children learned the names of fallen heroes. Monuments were built to honor the fleet that saved humanity. But not everyone could celebrate easily. Many families mourned the ones who never returned. The cost of victory hung in every heart. Rowan visited the memorial site quietly one evening. It stood on a hill overlooking the ocean, where thousands of names were carved into smooth black stone. He ran his hand over the names of his lost officers: Commander Ree, Captain Soren, Lieutenant Vega. Each one was a memory, a voice, a life. The sound of waves filled the air, soft and eternal. Lyra joined him there. "They would be proud," she said. Rowan looked at her. "They should have been here to see this." "They are," she replied. "Just not in the way we hoped." He didn't answer. They stood together in silence for a long time, watching the sunset paint the sky in red and gold. For the first time in months, Rowan felt something like peace. Weeks turned into months. Humanity began rebuilding the fleet. Scientists studied the wreckage of alien machines, trying to understand the enemy's technology. New defenses were planned, new alliances formed. The threat had been destroyed, but no one wanted to take chances. In a high-security lab, researchers discovered something strange. A small fragment of alien metal had survived the explosion. It pulsed faintly with energy like a heartbeat. They isolated it immediately and sent the data to the military. When Rowan received the report, he read it silently. Then he closed the file and looked out the window at the night sky. "They're not gone," he whispered. He didn't tell the public. Humanity needed peace, not fear. But in his heart, he knew the war might return someday. And when it did, humanity would be ready again. One morning, Rowan was walking through the command center when a young cadet stopped him. "Sir, may I ask you something?" He nodded. "Go ahead." The cadet looked nervous. "How did you know we'd win, sir? When everything seemed lost?" Rowan smiled faintly. "I didn't," he said. "But I knew we had to try. That's what makes us human. We fight for each other even when hope seems impossible." The cadet saluted, inspired by his words. Rowan walked away, his footsteps echoing softly through the hall. That night he returned once more to the observation deck of the Resolute, now repaired and shining like new. The ship would soon be decommissioned and turned into a museum. He stood there alone, looking out at the stars. They were peaceful again, silent and endless. He thought about the past, the first warning signals, the desperate battle, the explosion that lit up the void. He remembered every face, every voice, every sacrifice. He closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. When he opened them again, he felt something strange, not sorrow, but gratitude. Humanity had survived the impossible. The stars no longer looked like threats, they looked like promises. He whispered softly, "We are still here." The stars shimmered as if answering him. Far across the galaxy, where the light of the explosion had long faded, a faint signal pulsed in the darkness. It was weak, almost nothing, but it was alive. It carried data, fragments, and memory. Slowly, piece by piece, it began to rebuild, but that was far away, in another corner of the universe. For now, Earth was safe. The people slept peacefully under the same stars that had once burned with war. And though Admiral Rowan Hale knew that darkness might one day return, he also knew something even stronger. Humanity would be ready. Because even in the vast silence of space, courage has an echo, and that echo, born from sacrifice and unity, would last forever.